So welcome to another Feature Fridays, and today we're going to be discussing some of the updates in VMware Cloud Director 10.2 and some of the UI updates and extensibility capabilities. So again, I'm pleased to be joined by Jörg. So Jörg, do you want to just quickly introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Jörg. I'm a technical product manager in the Cloud Services Business Unit at VMware.
And we have a new guest today. Thanks, Jörg. We have a new guest today, Martin Marinov. Martin, do you want to just introduce yourself, who you are, what you do, what's your role?
Hi, everybody. My name is Martin Marinov. I'm part of the Cloud Director engineering team, taking UI architect role as of now, working on everything that is UI related. Thank you.
Yeah, well, it's great to have you here, Martin. Thank you very much for your time today.
It's a pleasure for me.
Excellent, cool. Well, we're going to get the lowdown on all of the kind of new capabilities and features in 10.2. So 10.2 really brought some nice new capabilities to the UI, things like advisories and guided tours, and the existing capabilities with global searches. So let's dive a little bit more into those views specifically, Jörg, and start looking at what can a provider do, for example, what can a tenant do from these new capabilities.
Yeah, absolutely. And since we are talking about UI, let's just directly start looking into the portals.
Yeah.
No need to discuss a lot of architectural stuff here. Let me share my connection to the demo environment. Okay. So I'm logged in as a provider administrator to the provider portal of the 10.2 VCD environment. And there are a few things here that have been introduced in 10.2 just to help providers to add new, more efficiency to their daily workflows and to be faster and get started with VCD.
Mm-hmm.
I guess we can start with one addition that went into the new UI in the administration tab at the very end here, which is the advisories. So that is some feature that I think was a very common feature request in past. The advisories are meant for providers to be able to send out some messages to the tenant portal. And these messages will show up as very prominent banners in the tenant portal and will allow a provider to just notify a tenant about ongoing or planned maintenance windows, perhaps some outages, perhaps some special offerings and so on. So whatever you can imagine.
Okay.
The advisories themselves, they are pretty straightforward to use. So you can create a new advisory with some demo text with the description.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah.
You get the you can select the priority. So that priority is defines on how important and what actions are possible for these banners in the tenant portal. So if they have to stay always on, if they can be dismissed or snoozed as a tenant, or if they just sort of are as a notice, help people to understand what's going on.
And whereabouts would they appear in the kind of tenant view then? When are these like banners along the top or?
Mm-hmm. Yes, these are banners along the top. We will see that. We will create one now and then see that in the tenant portal, just how they look like from a tenant perspective. And you can also see in the preview, depending on the priority that you select here, they change the color and the sort of icons in here.
Okay.
You can define a date from where and until when they are active. So if you have some, I can just put some time frame while they should be shown, and then you can publish them either to everyone, all users in all organizations. You can publish them to the system administrators, which might be helpful for a large provider where they might have different operational teams that work rather as provider administrator roles, or you can even publish them to specific tenants. That might be something, I don't know if you have realized that there's some capacity short back and you want to offer to a specific tenant some new capabilities, things like that, to just sort of notify a single tenant.
And York, if I was going to use this as, for example, I know a new security vulnerability, like a new cert's come out, and is there any logic in here? I see you can put preview links in here as well, so you can link out to obviously rectification action. But is there any way to sort of say, well, you know, if you're running this particular version of OS, this is a critical patch, and have it just display to those tenants, or would you need to do your research first into the inventory of those tenants?
Yeah, you would have to do your research first. So there's no automation of these advisories that automatically pop up.
Right.
However, they are, as usual, in VCD available through APIs. So if you have some certain process where at the end of a process, a support request process, or some just operational procedure that you have established as provider, at the end there is some notification to a tenant, and you can automate that notification to the tenant.
Great. So if it was like an emergency patch, for example, you know, Windows is classic for coming out with these things, then you could actually then use the API, do an inventory drop, find out which tenants you were going to be needing that update, and then push this to those guys.
Yeah, that would be possible.
Yeah, cool.
Okay, yeah, let's just create that advisory here and keep it for now, and then later when we move over to the tenant portal, we will see in the tenant portal how it looks like.
Okay.
Yeah, and then while we are on that page, you might have noticed there is one new icon down here that shows up in the provider portal automatically, which is part of the guided tours plugin. So this guided tours plugin is another new feature in 10.2 that helps administrators to create some sort of walkthrough or click-through tours through the portal. So it is sort of a interactive documentation to use the portal, and helps really to walk through the individual steps that you have to do to achieve certain tasks. So, for example, to work with the advisories, or to create a new organization, whatever. The tours that show up here are part of the so-called assistant. So that assistant is that small icon that shows up here. The whole configuration, also to define and edit and record these tours, is part of an extension with the guided tours in the more menu.
Is this something that comes as default with 10.2, or do you actually have to download the extension and deploy it?
That comes, the plugin, so this extension, the functionality comes as default with 10.2. Right now, with a few tours already included, but we have the mechanism to prepare that allows you to import more tours locally from a JSON file. Or in future, we also plan to have some published repository where you, we from a VMware perspective can share additional tours, and you also can, just record additional tours and share them.
Okay, cool. But what sorry, is that, does this plugin need installing, or does it come as default in 10.2?
That comes out of the box.
All right, okay.
Yeah, you can see here that we have already 3 tours predefined. And one of that is the working with the advisories. In the menu, you can edit the tour, save the tour to a JSON file. That if you want to, perhaps change that or publish it or share it between different users, and you can also delete it. And there's that include in the assistant menu entry, which is disabled here because the tour is already part of the assistant. If you add that one, then this tour will show up in the small icon here with the.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Okay.
And
so, the tours are able to be assigned to specific tenants, assistants, or is it?
These are global for now. We are working on or planning to make them more fine-grained so that you can decide tours that should be published to tenants and based on the tenant level, but for now they are global.
And if I had quite a few, because I can imagine a service provider who's got multiple services in VCD is going to want to use this feature. I mean, it's going to be great to be able to kind of give you as a tenant a guided tour of a particular service, or how to, how to interact with a service provider, perhaps how to raise a ticket or whatever it might be, you're going to get quite a few tours appearing in the advisory. Is there any way of kind of not limiting, but making that view easier for a tenant to navigate? Is that in the plan, or is that possible now?
Yeah, so that's something where you would want to select which different tours should go into the assistant, so that you have the assistant sort of selecting the tours that are relevant for the tenant. But that's not, well, right now you can just select which tours are shown in the assistant and which not. For the more tenant specific stuff, that's something we plan for future.
Yeah, I mean, in the future, right, you could have, I don't know, 15 tours on NSX distributed firewalling, 20 tours on disaster recovery availability. The advisory list could get pretty long, couldn't it?
Yeah, that's something we, of course, also make sure that we get the proper way to navigate them and to structure them.
Yeah.
One thing for the tools, they are already well prepared to be translated. Currently, the tours that come out of the box are just in English, but the mechanism is there to also have them localized in the local language of the user or the browser setting.
Okay. So the advice now would be use the tours, create your tours, import your tours, but potentially keep the number of tours to as minimum as you can possibly manage to keep that advisory list quite small.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, for the tours themselves, to give you an impression, if you hit that play tour, that really is a guidance that walks you through what's needed for to solve a certain task, like in our case, create a new advisory. So you have these additional steps. They either run on a per click base, or you can define them to run automatically, so that the wizard sort of automatically walks you and do the tasks for you. Of course, you can also pause that and fill out the individual steps manually. There is an autofill functionality that allows you to just sort of, if you resume that, it will automatically fill the text in here. Of course, that's good to learn how a certain process works, but for the real data, you want to add in your real fields here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you can see these tours, they have multiple steps. You can see in what steps they are. There's a small sort of progress bar at the on top of the page. And it's really a very good way to learn how certain UI functionality or how certain functionality and user workflows in the provider and the tenant portal work in VCD.
Yeah. Yeah, it's brilliant.
Yeah, let's go back in here. Let's discard test and go back to the guided tours. And of course, you can also record new tours. That's something where you have that additional record tour section, and then depending on your different selection, there are some keyboard shortcuts that help you. And then when you start recording, it really records the individual clicks that you do in the portal, and then you can create a tour of whatever you want to show.
Is there any specific browser support required for this, or is it pretty good with the latest and greatest?
I think that is that the guided tours support the same set of browser as the regular VCD portal. So it's part of the same sort of test bundle. For existing tours, you can also see how they are represented as part of individual steps with certain things like you want to show something, you want to click something, you want to fill in a form, and so on. Clicks on individual fields, buttons, drop-down fields, and so on. And then there's the time for the auto continuation that you can change, and of course you can change or delete individual steps from an existing tool.
That's brilliant. So you could use these as really an onboarding guide for, how to set up your VDC, how to set up your networking, all that type of essential information that normally.
Yeah, so it really helps you as a provider to make people familiar with the VCD portal.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
So there are two things that you have to keep in mind when working or when creating and working with the tours. First of all, be aware that when you create the tour, and you play the tour, these things really happen. So the tour, if you play that, walks through the individual wizards and really clicks these buttons. So if you have a tour that does something, that something happens.
Okay.
So as one example, when we have where we can see the managed user quotas as part of that tour, it does create a new user with a predefined password. So if you would run that tour, it really creates that user with the password. So you really have to be a bit, well, just cautious and be mindful about what happens in the tour, because once this tour plays through, yeah, it really happens and does the individual tasks. That's usually, well, except for user creation, when you create stuff, not that bad. But if you have some tours that, I don't know, show how to delete a VApp, you really have to be aware of what happens there in background when you play the tour.
Right. So yeah. So do you have, what is the recommendation then, to have a kind of a cleanup part of the end of the tour, or I guess because you don't, if many people are going to be running the tour at the same time, are you going to have a conflict of naming conventions and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, that could happen. The tours don't do any magic for the VCD backend. So all the restrictions in terms of uniqueness of objects and so on, they still apply, of course. So you
Right.
have to be mindful about that.
Okay.
And then there's one other thing that you have to keep in mind when you use the tours to advertise certain functionality. The tours, they rely on the different objects and screens and wizards and buttons that are there in the portal. So they only work for things that are really there in VCD. So if you want to create a tour to showcase the creation of Kubernetes clusters with container service extension, that of course only works if there is container service extension set up.
Yeah.
If you tour that shows how to configure, I don't know, a firewall or any other screens in NSXT, only works if there is really NSXT configured for the provider VDC and you have these screens.
And if you wanted to see the tenant's view and record a tour from the tenant's view, is that possible?
Yeah, that is possible as well. The guided tours technically is a UI plugin itself, which means in the customized portal plugin, you can just define if you want to publish that to the tenant portal as well.
Right. So you could use that to record, this is what it would look like for a tenant to do this task, and then remove it if you needed to get rid of it again. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, with that, I think we have seen the new features UI related from the provider perspective. Now let's look into the tenant portal and see what we have there. New cool features in the tenant portal as well that we want to show today. Yeah, so I'm logged in here as an org admin into my tenant portal. And the first thing that we can see is, well, we get that nice banner on top from our advisory. That was a notification. So in this case, I have a dismiss button to just tell the UI, yeah, I read the notification and it doesn't show up anymore. Based on the other importance levels, there might be also a snooze button where you just sort of snooze the notification so that it doesn't annoy you for the next couple of minutes while you work with it. But when you log in, I don't know, the next day it will show up again, depending on the importance. And then if you have with the highest importance, it will just does not have any button, so you cannot get rid of it at all. So as provider, be very careful with them because, as you all know from cookie banners and so on, these things might get annoying very quickly. Okay. Yeah, so in the tenant portal, first of all, you might have seen that there is one new item in the top menu. So we got the networking section here, which is just a different way to have a view on all the network related objects that we have in VCD, like the networks configured for in the different org VDCs. We have a list of edge gateways that are configured for the tenant. And if I would have NSXT data center groups, they would also show up here in this view.
Right.
The links here are just, well, they represent the objects that are there so you can see, well, the different organization VDCs where they are defined. And then if you open them up, they just show the same menu and the same entrance or the same entries here with the same information, of course, that you would see in the data center view. And you can even open them up in the virtual data center context, and then it just switches over to the regular view where you get used to and have seen them in past as well.
Yeah. So it's just making things a little bit easier to see and condense.
Yeah. It's sort of a different perspective from a networking perspective. That's for two reasons, because often, well, when you do network related things, it might be a different kind of user that's rather interested in all the network related stuff and not so much interested into the individual VMs and other workloads that are connected to these workflows, especially if you have larger org VDCs with different people and a lot of different networks designed. So that's one sort of possible target group for network view. And the other one is that more and more the networks get, let's say, more global and less related to one single org VDC. So in the VDC context, you select your org VDC, and then you have the network section with the network and edges within that org VDC. However, well, it's networking, and we have cross VDC networking. We get more and more functionality into multi-site networking, where individual networks even can span multiple data center groups and multiple locations here. And that's why the networking or this view on the networking here provides just a more global access, so that you don't need to get into the context of a single org VDC first to see on the network views.
And I guess this is, I guess, Martin, this is kind of a question for you, really, as we go forward and start kind of architecting newer views with UI to kind of make things a little bit more simple for users, or in this case, more aggregated for users so they can see where things are. Are we going to carry on seeing improvements like this through the next, releases of VCD, where there's going to be more sort of centralization of these components into single views?
So thanks for that question. So for the globalization listings, it's really to have single pane of glass when you can work in a multi-site environment, as well as when you have relations between the different objects, even within a single site. So that's not really a one step just for the release, but it's an ongoing effort to make sure that all of the entities and all of the objects exposed by Cloud Director have one single pane where you can start from.
Right. Makes things a lot easier, I suppose, especially as we're now coming into the multi-cloud networking world with VCD associations and especially with CDS as well now, I guess, right?
Yeah, and by the way, here on the applications that you are showing on the screen, if that's a multi-site environment where you have associated orgs, the user is able to see all the org associations, and they can browse the different virtual applications on VMs per site.
Right. So it is really becoming that single pane of glass from a UI view, which is fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which really makes it cater to what the user wants to work with. So as a virtual machine owner, I log into the Tenant Portal, and then I want to find and work with the virtual machine that I own and that I have to do some tasks with. And typically, I don't really care in which org VDC that virtual machine runs. So it's really different points of view, of course, into the same object.
And I guess another question, kind of perhaps for you, Martin, is when you look at things like NSX, T&V, and networking, and what's possible, for example, in Cloud Director Service with distributed firewalling versus what's possible with on-prem NSXT distributed firewalling, getting the UI to dynamically list those capabilities or filter out those capabilities, is that something that's consistently well, it must be changing all the time, right? The way the products are evolving and in the deployments.
Well, unfortunately, I can't really answer the question right now, and as I'm not really in deep with all the networking aspects of the cloud director, so probably we can follow up on that later.
All right, no worries, no worries. Yeah, I mean, I think it's just quite interesting. Some of the functionality, for example, in terms of the distributed firewalling in Cloud Director Service. I know you can't see the aspects of it. There's just nothing there because obviously it's not enabled in NSX-T in the integration that we have. So I think there's some UI work they've been focusing on there, but that would apply to all other areas as well where there's different functionality.
Yep.
Yeah, these restructuring or these additional different views on the different aspects of your resources, they are preparing to make the UI more flexible in future. If you think about in past, you really all the way everything that you work with was structured as part of one single org VDC, and then depending on the org VDC settings, you have your different options here for the networks, for the VMs, for the VApps, and so on. And now this restructuring really gives a more more flexible way for our engineers to build different UI screens where they belong from a user perspective.
Yeah.
Okay. One more thing that I want to just mention here, since we are in the virtual machines view, which we introduced in 10.2, is the data exporter. So that is something where in pretty much every view where you have a list view, you can just export that list view into a CSV file. So that works here for virtual machines. It also works for as an administrator for your list of organizations or organization VDCs, as a tenant, as I mentioned, for your VApps, for your virtual machines, for the networks, and so on. And it's really very simple. You hit that export button, and then you can define about all the different field names in the CSV file. It should do some sanitizing for CSV injection, and then you can select which columns you want to export into the CSV file, and then if you export that, it really saves it as a CSV file.
Oh, that's cool. And do you get it? I saw some aspects of the metadata there. Is that metadata from VCD or is that data from other sources as well?
That is all metadata metadata attributes of the objects in VCD.
So it's VCD only. Okay.
Yeah. Of course, a lot of the information comes from vCenter, but that's stored from the VCD database. Martin, you had a comment as well?
Yeah, just one comment here. Normally, the UI is getting a lot of data in order to show some meaningful stuff to the end customer, but giving all the screen constraints that we have, we can't really show everything. But when you want to export, essentially you are exporting all the available data for the entities.
Okay, great. Yeah, and that's very powerful because that is a very easy way to do some sort of an inventory management. So if you want to get a quick way, of course you can use the VCD APIs and Postman or PowerCLI or whatever other REST API client you want to get a list of all your VMs. But if you are not too familiar with the APIs yet, then that is a very easy way to extract this list information data into a CSV file.
And is that built into some of the plugins like CSE, for example, as well?
That's currently only in the
just in VCD.
The core
right.
features, yeah.
Yeah.
But it is available for the different views and also in the provider portal. When we have our virtual machines here, the apps here, pretty much in every screen where you have this list view, you have an export button as well.
Cool.
Okay. Yeah, and then there's one more thing that I want to show today, which is the quick search. So the quick search is a search capability and a new way to work with the portal that we introduced in 10.2, which is very helps you to go around the different screens in the portal very, very efficient. To open up or to get more information, you can, open up that help, and then there's that quick search in here, but you really should get used to the control and dot keyboard shortcut, which opens up the quick search. And if I open that up, you can see here, wherever you are, it opens up a search box, and in that search box, you can search globally for different items of the portal, and then within the page, really for the individual objects in that. So if I'm here, for example, connected, or I'm in the networking field, and I want to search for a certain virtual machine, then I can very easily just start typing here to with the URL to get to my virtual machines. I don't even have to use the mouse to go there, so really can use the keyboard arrow keys to browse around in the search results here. And then with pressing enter, it really sort of executes that navigation call and gets me to the virtual machines view. And then in here, you can search for the individual object. So if I want to get my master machines from the Kubernetes clusters, and I know the name, then I just type the beginning of the name, get in here, and then can navigate through the different virtual machines that match that criteria. Again, all with the keyboard, so you don't even need to use the mouse for that. And again, pressing enter, it jumps to that virtual machine, and I get the the detailed view of that virtual machine. And now the really cool thing about the quick search comes in, because the quick search not only allows you to search for global navigation and then all the tabs or the individual items that you can see in the different screens here, or the individual objects, but it also allows you to really search for actions. So you can see, or you can go to anything that's in the submenus here. If you want to see, since I'm in perspective, I want to see the different NICs in here, I can do that. And then if I don't know, for example, want to do some power operation or any other action on the virtual machine, you can also just start typing in here, and then you get to the actions that are possible. And you can really run these actions just using the keyboard.
So that's complete menu navigation and action navigation when your mouse batteries give up. Love it.
Yeah, absolutely. Or if you are used to use a keyboard, and then that you get some very efficient way to walk your way through the different screens in the portal.
That's brilliant. Love it. Absolutely love it.
It might take some time to get used to it, but get used to that control dot keyboard shortcut to open up the quick search, and then just get familiar with the functionality. And whenever next time you would want to use the mouse to go to a certain menu and do a certain task, to navigate through that, use the keyboard, and you likely save yourself a lot of time.
Yeah, brilliant. Oh, that's fantastic. So there's two great capabilities there for provider admins, the advisories, the guided tours, and then a lot more usability and kind of centralization of views for the tenants. I think 10.2 is given I got to admit, I particularly like the guided tours and the ability to put notifications up there. I think that's something that's been needed for quite a long time, especially for the world that we're in now with more and more self-service. So Martin, a quick word from you then on where do you see these capabilities going, and what in your mind is the kind of next stages for these type of functions?
You're speaking specifically for the guided tours?
Sure, or in general UI. You're the UI architect, right?
Okay, thanks. So with regard to the guided tours, one of the key missing functionality is the built-in way to share and publish guided tours between the different users. Instead of just importing the definition of the guided tour, no matter if it is local file or a public repository. The other thing that we really are trying to focus from UI perspective is to give an ability to make a more robust and easy way to build UI plugins and deliver key functionalities through plugins, including the way of having guided tours as part of those plugins, so you really understand how the things are used when you have a new plugin installed. Okay, so that's from guided tours stuff. We also did really great job into enable Cloud Director for Kubernetes, where we use vSphere Kubernetes feature and gives that ability to the service provider and the tenant, but I believe you're going to cover that in a separate session.
Yeah.
So yeah, from the pure UI perspective, I would stop here because there are a lot of ongoing stuff we are leveraging or working on, but still don't have a complete scope defined that I can share now.
Okay. Okay. So watch this space, in other words.
Yeah, and we will make sure, of course, in future feature Fridays to cover things like the new Kubernetes cluster, CSE 3.0 with the native vSphere Kubernetes integration, and of course we eventually will have another session to showcase all the different new tools that are being working on when it comes to UI customization, branding, and custom UI plugins and extensibility.
Brilliant, brilliant. Well, listen, guys, it's been fantastic to have you on. I'm super pleased to see the progress that we're making in 10.2 alone. I think this just goes from from good to better to brilliant, and the UI features I think we've shown today are certainly going to make the providers make their service a lot easier for a tenant to consume and hopefully drive more consumption for everyone. So Jörg, Martin, thank you very much for your time today, and have a great rest of your week.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Guy. Have a great time with Cloud Director.
We do. Cheers.